This is a 2004 Chrysler Crossfire, and it's weird. These days, we think of Chrysler as big cars with big engines, but back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they had merged with Mercedes-Benz, and they made a Chrysler version of the little Mercedes SLK Roadster. It sounds weird, and it is. And today, I'm going to review the Crossfire and show you its many quirks and features. Before I get started, big news, this Crossfire is currently for sale and it's being auctioned live on Cars and Bids. This Crossfire is unmodified, it's a limited model with less than 50,000 miles, and it has the rare manual transmission. This is the one to have. So once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to visit the live auction for this Crossfire, where you can bid on it and buy it only on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Chrysler Crossfire, starting with exactly how this came to be. So, in the late 1990s, Mercedes-Benz and Chrysler merged to form Daimler Chrysler. This is generally forgotten about now, but it was a huge deal back then. Those two companies got together and they called it a merger of equals. That's what they said. And the goal was to find parts sharing and platform sharing and operational synergies and blah, blah, blah. The kind of stuff business people always say, and it doesn't often work out. That was, in fact, the situation here. The two companies got together, things didn't go so well, and within 10 years, both corporations wanted out. The merger was eventually unwound, Mercedes-Benz went off to do their thing, and Chrysler got swallowed up by Fiat. But one of the results of the brief Daimler-Chrysler merger was the Crossfire, which was a Chrysler sports car based on the R170 Mercedes-Benz SLK. Now, that's the SLK that was sold from 96 to 2004, but the interesting thing about the Crossfire is that it came out in 2004 just as Mercedes-Benz was redesigning the SLK for an all-new model. In other words, Chrysler got the old one, a merger of equals. Yeah. Sure. Now, the Crossfire did have very distinctive styling and design language compared to the Mercedes-Benz SLK. In fact, the Crossfire was based on a concept car Chrysler had released in 2001 called the Crossfire Concept. And honestly, the production version was fairly faithful to the concept car. They did a pretty good job bringing that concept car to life, especially considering they were working with an existing platform from Mercedes-Benz. Now, this was only offered with rear-wheel drive, and you could get it as a coupe like this one or a soft top convertible. Now, the Crossfire was offered with two available engine options. The vast majority of Crossfire models, including this one, used a 3.2-liter Mercedes-Benz V6 that had 215 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. This engine was offered throughout the Crossfire's entire production run from the 04 model year through 08 when it went away. But for a brief period, there was also a high-performance version of the Crossfire called the SRT6. This was based on the Mercedes-Benz SLK 32 AMG at the time, and it used this same powertrain but with a supercharger to boost power up to 350 horses. Now, this was very rare, only sold in 05 and 06, and then it was gone. You don't see too many, and the crucial thing is that the manual transmission was only offered with the base engine. So you could get the performance model, but it was automatic only, or you could get the base model with the manual. It was rare, but that's what this Crossfire is. Now, as for the engine bay itself, like I mentioned, this came from Mercedes-Benz, and although they've dressed it up with an engine cover that says Crossfire, just a cursory glance around can tell you you're not looking at a typical Chrysler engine. For example, right here it's printed Vorsicht Oberdrive extra call system. This is in massive letters right when you open the hood. Needless to say, this was not your grandfather's Chrysler 300B. But let's move on to some of the other quirks, starting with the key, which you can see here. This was just a Mercedes-Benz key that they stuck the Chrysler logo in this little circle instead of the Mercedes-Benz three-pointed star. On my late 90s G-Wagon, I have basically the exact same key, just adapted here for the Crossfire. Now, that's one of very, very, very many Mercedes-Benz things that were shared with this car. I always knew the Crossfire was based on the SLK and used the same powertrain, but I figured there were a lot of differences. And Chrysler and Mercedes at the time claimed it shared only 40% of its parts with the SLK, but it feels like a lot more than that. However, most of that stuff is inside. On the outside of this car, it had a totally distinctive look compared to the SLK. This is where Chrysler came in and did their thing, and frankly, looking at this car with a quick glance, you wouldn't really be able to tell this is based on a Mercedes-Benz of any kind. It had a totally different look, style, design. Every aspect of it was changed, and it was available as a coupe, which was a big deal because the SLK in this generation was only ever available as a convertible, and that was a unique feature the Crossfire had over its SLK counterpart, even though they shared so many parts. Now, there are a couple of particularly distinctive Chrysler touches on the outside of this car. One, these long lines on the hood. This was like a Chrysler thing in the 2000s. It was supposed to be a retro touch, a callback to some popular 60s model when Chrysler was at its heyday. Regardless, this car had it, and several other Chryslers in this era did as well, and that was a very Chrysler look. Another rather distinctive Crossfire touch is the silver windshield surround, which was kind of always something the Crossfire was known for. Regardless of what color your car was, you had a silver windshield surround that kind of helped the windshield pop if that's what you wanted it to do. One little known fact, however, the windshield wasn't silver on every Crossfire. It's only on the nice trim, the limited model. If you got a base model Crossfire, which was actually the rarer version, your windshield surround was instead painted matte black. You didn't get the silver, but the vast majority of Crossfires were the nicer, higher trims, the Limited and the SRT, and they all got the silver windshield trim. Now, the other cool Crossfire thing, at least for the coupe model like this, is like a lot of coupes, it's not just a coupe, it's actually a hatchback. You come around here to the back, you open it, there's a little latch back here, you pop open the tailgate, and it reveals actually a surprisingly large cargo area back here. You have pretty decent space for stuff if you wanted to put it in the Crossfire. The opening is kind of narrow owing to the overall design language of the car, but the cargo area itself is reasonably large. And if you lift up the cargo floor, you can see there are a few tools down here designed to help you change a tire if you have a flat on the roadway, and you have this very Mercedes-Benz warning label. You can see it even has a Mercedes part number and a picture on it of a Mercedes-Benz wheel design. That was the level of Mercedes-Benz influence there was on the supposedly Chrysler Crossfire. But it's on the inside, like I mentioned before, that you really get the full Mercedes-Benz treatment. All the part sharing must have happened in this interior because you get in here and it really feels like you're climbing into a Mercedes-Benz. As someone who's owned a lot of Mercedes products from this era, wow, there is not much Chrysler in this vehicle. For example, the turn signal stalk. Everyone with a Mercedes has used this turn signal stalk. They used it for decades. Above that, the cruise control stalk, straight out of Mercedes-Benz. Same deal with the switch to turn on the headlights. That is directly from Mercedes-Benz vehicles. The famous triangular hazard light switch is a Mercedes-Benz one, as are all the switches next to it. The door locks, traction control off, the dual heated seat levels, all straight out of Mercedes-Benz. This power mirror switch is a Mercedes-Benz switch. The font in the gauge cluster on the digital parts is directly out of Mercedes-Benz models. Frankly, even the parts that they tried to disguise and make look less Mercedes-Benz are still Mercedes-Benz. This center control stack, they painted it silver, gave it kind of an aluminum look that was distinctive from what the SLK had, but they kept all the controls in the same position. Some of the controls are basically identical. It's all Mercedes-Benz. It really is impressive just how Mercedes-Benz this car really is. Again, always know it was based based on the SLK. What I didn't realize is it is an SLK. Now, with all of that said, there are some rather unusual quirks in this interior. For one, unlike American cars from this era, but very much like German cars from this era, they didn't really leave space for a cup holder. So to get one, you have to push on this panel, and then this incredibly chintzy, crappy cup holder pops up, and that's your single individual cup holder for 2 front seats. The Germans didn't believe in cup holders in this era. You didn't need to drink coffee or tea while driving. They only believed in cigarette lighters and ashtrays. Another rather interesting quirk is this panel mounted here on the lower part of the driver's dashboard. It sort of intrudes into the footwell, and frankly, if you're a taller driver like me, it kind of pushes on your shins while you're driving the car. I'm not sure why this is here, and I don't remember if the SLK from this era also had this panel, but it's kind of disappointing to lose that legroom and have your shins kind of bump up against it while you're driving along. Another interesting quirk is that the warning lights in the gauge cluster had their own special areas, and they were to the right and to the left of the gauge cluster itself. You can see when I turn on the car, they all light up in these little special gauge warning light areas that aren't actually in the gauges, with the exception of the traction control off light, which you can see is right here in the middle and always looks illuminated even when it's not. I'm driving around thinking, why is traction control off? And then I press the button to turn it back on, and the light lights up even more. So even when traction control is on, it kind of looks like it's off because that one warning light is placed in that weird spot. Also interesting and quirky about this car is this button right here, which you can see has an image of a Crossfire on it, and then very subtly, the same image but with a small rear wing that has been extended out. That button obviously allowed you to deploy the rear wing. You would press it, and then as you can see, the rear wing automatically extends out, so it's doing its job to provide downforce, apparently. And of course, if you press the button in the other direction, this time you have to hold it down, the rear wing would automatically retract back into the car, again power operated, and it would return to its slippery teardrop shape. Now, you didn't have to press this button in order for the wing to operate. It also would extend and retract at speed depending on how fast you were going. But if you wanted the wing to come out so you could clean it or so you could flex, you do have this special button so you could do that. Now, another interesting quirk of this vehicle is the storage situation. You have a glove box, pretty standard, but you also have door panel storage with netting to keep your stuff in place. Not some leather or plastic compartment. Instead, you got netting, which was unusual. Now, if you wanted extra storage, there was actually also a little leather pouch between the seat backrests mounted on this panel between the seats and the cargo area. You could stick more stuff in there. And you can see there are even some little latches in this vicinity for you to holster something. I guess for an umbrella, I think that was the theory, but you could also use various other long cylindrical things in there if you wanted to, and that's what that was for. Now, interestingly enough, there is also another netted pouch storage area behind the seat back at the very base back here, but the seats don't have latches for a quick release forward. So if you wanted to access this netting, you actually had to sit there with the power-operated backrest button going forward slowly, slowly, slowly until the netting had revealed itself. I guarantee no Crossfire owner on the planet has ever actually used this netting for that purpose, but it is there. Now, the last and perhaps most interesting quirk of this particular Crossfire is the manual transmission. You can see here 6-speed manual transmission, and that was special. Not too many of these cars had the manual. Like I said, the SRT, the performance model, even that was automatic only, but you could get a stick in the base Crossfire. Now, not a lot of people know this, but the manual was also offered in the SLK. Both the base model, the SLK 230, and the SLK 320, which used the same V6 as the Crossfire. You could get a manual in both. Most people didn't, but it was available, and so it was also available in the Crossfire. Now, interestingly, despite the Crossfire's rather unusual origin story with the Daimler-Chrysler merger and taking a Mercedes and making it a Chrysler, it was actually fairly successful. Chrysler managed to sell from 04 to 08 about 76,000 Crossfire models. Roughly 43,000 of those were coupes and 33,000 were convertibles. Only about 4,000 SRT 6s. But 76,000 is a pretty good production production run for a little compact, kind of pricey sports car, it was relatively successful. And they sold it in other markets too, not just the US and Canada, but they sold them in Europe, and you go there and you still see them around occasionally. It was a relatively successful car. Unfortunately, the Daimler-Chrysler merger was not so successful, and so there was never another Crossfire. That started to unwind around 07, 08. Pretty soon it was all done, all gone, and Chrysler obviously took a different strategy with their performance cars. No more little Germany stuff. Instead, the cars got big, the engines got big, and everything changed. But the Crossfire is an unusual relic from a very interesting time in Chrysler history, the time that they built a Chrysler that was a Mercedes-Benz. Now, I have never driven a Crossfire, ever, and so I'm very excited to get behind the wheel and see how the Chryslerified SLK drives. Let's go. All right, driving the Crossfire. I have never driven a Crossfire before, believe it or not. My first impression getting in this car, it is impossible to explain. I've owned a lot of Mercedes-Benz from this era, and I own one now. I have an old late 90s G-Wagon. It's amazing how Mercedes-Benz this interior is. All this stuff is just straight out of Mercedes-Benz. And I'm sitting in here, and I've always thought of this car as a Chrysler. And I know it's got Mercedes-Benz underpinnings and stuff, but I always thought of it as a Chrysler with like a Mercedes platform and powertrain. No, it's like a Mercedes that happens to have Chrysler badging. That's really what it is. Now, the fortunate thing is this 3.2-liter six-cylinder engine was one of the most reliable powertrains that Mercedes ever made. So first thing I noticed driving this car, it was clearly set up as an automatic. And I say that because it's interesting how much my left shin, when I'm going to the clutch, impacts this little piece under the dash. It wouldn't be such a problem if I wasn't as tall, but it also wouldn't be such a problem in automatic. I suppose I could put the seat further back, but then the seat's further back. It's not necessarily where I want it to be sitting, but that works okay. Also, the manual transmission in this car is just, it's fine, but it's not amazing. And I clearly, this was, from the SLK, Mercedes-Benz was not intending to develop the world's finest manuals. It just wasn't what they did. It wasn't what they were known for. And so the clutch is a little heavy, but also not particularly linear. The gear throws are short and fine, but relatively vague. Even when it's in gear, it's fairly vague. The whole manual shift action situation definitely isn't perfect. In fact, with that, I wonder if maybe I should have ended up going after an SRT6 to review, just because the automatic probably is better suited, and I loved that Super V6 powertrain. The steering weight is pretty good. It's not a particularly immediate steering, but it feels nice and heavy, which is good. It's a little bit slow to turn. Again, Mercedes-Benz. I mean, Mercedes was not known for precise, quick sports cars in this era. Nonetheless, it does have the solid feel that Mercedes-Benz models were known for in this era, which is nice. Power is good, and that's something like I mentioned, I've liked this powertrain. It's a reliable powertrain, and it's a relatively good, strong powertrain. They used it in a lot of different vehicles, and in some cases, this powertrain was just sort of powering a mid-sized crossover. But when it was being used in a car like this, where it was smaller, it actually made decent power and made the car surprisingly fun to drive, and that definitely is the situation here. This car is sporty and fun and pretty exciting to throw around. Overall, I gotta say, this is a Mercedes-Benz SLK. That's always been true of the Crossfire, like it always was an SLK, but it's amazing to me how true it is. I thought there would be more Chrysler to this car, but it really feels like I'm driving around in a Mercedes-Benz SLK, which means sort of heavier, more serious steering, not the best manual transmission, a good, smooth, reliable powertrain, and all the Mercedes switchgear to go along with it. This is a Chrysler in name and style only. I think it actually looks good, probably better than the original SLK, but it is interesting to get in this car, to drive this car, and to feel just how SLK it really is. They did not intend to really make a lot of changes, and it really has a Mercedes-Benz feel to it, for better or worse. I still do see a lot of these on the road, which suggests to me that they have been pretty reliable, and that people have kept them pretty well, which makes sense. They're probably always, second or third cars for people, and they're cool. They're fun to drive. I mean, it's a nice, fun car to drive. It's relatively quick, it's relatively smooth, and relatively reliable, and it looks cool, and it was never replaced, so it always it's the one and only Crossfire. There's a lot of cool stuff about it, but it is interesting just how deeply Mercedes-Benz it is, for better and worse. And so that's the Chrysler Crossfire. Weird? Yes, but also surprisingly fun. And these days, you're unlikely to encounter too many more when you're driving around. It's special, it's rare, it's quirky, and you can get this one on Cars and Bids. And now it's time to give this Crossfire a Doug score. And the Doug score is here, 47 out of 100, which puts the Crossfire here against some sort of similar cars. The Crossfire is cool, but it's not exactly the most exciting vehicle on the planet, offering good but not incredible Mercedes SLK handling and engine power, plus some attractive but not earth-shattering styling. I like the Crossfire, especially with a manual transmission, but it's not quite thrilling enough for me to really fall in love with it.